Welcome to the Operate podcast, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at company building from the perspective of the builders themselves. This is how we operate.
Welcome to the Operate podcast. I'm Kerry Ransom. Today's episode is sponsored by Hunt Club, a new category of search firm that leverages the power of relationships and referrals to find you the best talent for your company. Their technology is transforming thousands of subject matter experts into the world's largest and most powerful talent network. And they've got 10,000 trusted industry leaders that refer top talent across the nation to exciting positions like you might have in your organization. You can message me for more information, or you can go to huntclub.com and tell them that I sent you. I'm super excited to have Deepa Krishnan with me on the show today. And before we get to hear from her, let me tell you a little bit about Deepa, as I have greatly enjoyed getting to know her over the past year and change. She's currently the co-founder and CEO of Spoonful, a company focused on leading what I would call the food as medicine movement. Deepa and her team have created a leading application that helps consumers increase their confidence and safety when they are making food decisions. And they're either selecting foods to eat based on health restrictions or maybe allergies or diet that they're on. We'll talk much more about her and the company's path on the show today. But as I was saying, I've just greatly enjoyed getting to work with Deepa over the last year, as we are really excited to be an investor in Spoonful through Operate and get to work with she and her team on almost a day-to-day basis as they're building this really cool company. She has a really strong background in software product and data, having previously worked in a couple prominent data companies, and we'll talk about how that has influenced the work she's done at Spoonful. She's a graduate of Princeton, and she also got her JD at UCLA. So we are both fellow Bruins. Go Bruins. Deepa, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
I am thrilled to be chatting with you, Kerry.
Well, I gave a brief intro to Spoonful, so let's start at the beginning. I often like to tap into that insight that an entrepreneur has that leads them to start down this journey. What was the insight, as you think back, that led you to start Spoonful?
So, a few years ago for me, I was in this interesting space in life. I knew that I was ready to start a company. I had met my co-founder, Sam, at our prior job, which was in one of those data startups, data companies you mentioned. And I knew that professionally, this was a journey I was ready to take. And then on the personal front, I started having really weird physical symptoms that were impediments, I felt like, to just what I wanted to accomplish, like just stomach issues. And I actually started getting some breathing issues, and it just was all super weird stuff that felt like it came out of nowhere to me. And so I started seeing several doctors, and, I have MDs in the family. I've been, very trained to respect and appreciate medicine, in the sense that, if you have an issue, don't try to self-diagnose, despite, my own issues with doing that. And so I saw the GI, I saw the cardiologist, I saw him, I saw 2 allergists, and all we could come up with was, okay, it seems like you've developed adult onset asthma. And that weirded me out. It didn't feel right. But I said, okay, sure, let's do it. Let's see what I have to do next. And the traditional path is to go on a bunch of medication. And so I tried to do that for a very, very brief time. I was a terrible patient. I just didn't want to do that. And so I started doing my own homework. I think this was actually probably because a doctor at some point said to me, it actually sounds like you're manifesting food allergies, but you're not testing for food allergies. So you have environmental stuff, which I'd known all along, but this was something new. So I said, okay, well, maybe there's something else going on. I learned about food reactivity. I started doing my own online test, and really it was kind of a thing. A couple of years ago, food intolerance testing was starting to rise up. So I went through that process, went on an elimination diet, and found my food triggers. And lo and behold, when I went off of those foods, when I eliminated them from my diet, I felt significantly better, like meaningfully better. And I think sort of proved the disbelievers wrong in that sense of, like, actually food can really impact how you feel depending on your own physiology. And so I thought, okay, this is fantastic. I can, largely get off the meds and I know how to live my life. But that turned out to only be part of the journey, because then it came the time to actually like live that lifestyle and, eat a certain way and eliminate, certain products and find more products. And so the most frustrating thing to me was, well, for me, I was able to get to a certain point of comfort with some parts of removing foods from my diet, but having to go like all this multifaceted, like let's avoid this and this and this and this got really complicated. So that was just time consuming and annoying, and it felt outdated. And then the part that really irked me was how expensive it was. I just threw a lot of money away on like bad products because they met the need, or so I thought. And I found them from Googling, like finding a blog post and some random blogger recommended it. So why didn't I like it? And in that process, just wasted a ton of money. So that for me was the moment of something is broken here, or at least ripe for change. There's a market for people who are changing their lives through food as medicine, or for some, variation of that. And they're struggling to figure out not just what to eat, but what's worth their money. And around the same time, Sam, my co-founder, he likewise went on the Whole30, and he had previously used and does use diet for his health. And we were able to just commiserate around the user problem, and not just on how, it's so difficult to actually fundamentally find these foods and the waste of money, but, how socially isolating it can feel to be the person who is so, restricted on what they can actually eat, that, it creates social anxiety, it creates all these negative emotions, feelings of scarcity. And we thought, how cool would it be to, we said we wanted to work together on something new. We said, I left this part out earlier, but we always had this notion of like, we want to do good, like use our skills for good. Like, how cool would it be to help all of these millions of people who we know, after doing our research, we found out how big the market was. Like all of these people, if we could help them through our skill set and really view food as data, like that would be more than just a job, right? That would start to feel like a calling. And so we aligned on that. And then we thought, okay, let's just like hammer out the solution. Let's work on this. And so, yeah, the insight was the personal journey and just being ready. Like, I think we were sort of ready for the universe to show that to us professionally. And then just, having a great co-founder where we wanted to work through it together and iterate through the problem.
Such a good background. I think that notion of purpose, the personal feeling and aspect and relatedness that you had, I'm sure guides you and Sam virtually every day. As you think about though this, I think of food as I think I described it as like this powerful health solution. And I feel like we're really starting to wake up to that as a broader society. Do you think it's economics? Is it the beginnings of personalized medicine that we can sort of see and feel more than the current pharmaceutical industry recognizes at this stage? What is it that you point to and go, this is why this has such momentum behind it? Because I think we can all feel it. How do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. When we started Spoonful, the term, this is just a couple years ago, right? Like food as medicine wasn't used that often. I remember taking, investor calls and using that phrase, and I could hear the question mark behind the call. What is she talking about? Where is this, like, Marty on the West Coast? Like, what is this person talking about? But in the last several years, a lot of things hit, right? You're right. Personalized medicine started to get, more awareness, and it's something people talked about. They approached their healthcare provider with like, sure, that's what you say generally, but what about for me? Then around, I think it was probably 2018, right? When the opioid crisis hit, and we had all this awareness in the country on how much our system was dependent on, over prescribing medication, and that I think shed some light on, could there be some flaws in what we've been doing traditionally? Then you started to get, I don't know if it was, I can't profess to know why, but around the same time, you see doctors start to talk about what else could we help you do? Could we limit the medication we offer to you? Can we give you an alternative solution? Whether that was doctor driven or consumer driven, I'm not sure, but just that buy-in from the medical community was a big change where, you don't have to necessarily be on the fringes, your doctor was like literally recommending that you make this change. So I think that was a big part. You also started to see a lot of celebrities turn to these diets. Plant-based got so much movement. Before plant-based, it was gluten-free, right? But just this notion of like, you can change your health. That was a big change when like all these folks who we follow and we respect started to change their lifestyles. And then, like I said, there's so many reasons. I guess I'd say probably the last one that jumps out at me is COVID. We all as a world went through and are going through something really crazy. And, food is a little bit in our control, right? Compared to so many things that are out of it. And just this idea that, maybe it wasn't the quote unquote immunity diets that started to rise up, but maybe those weren't the ones, or maybe they are, but there is just this more societal awareness of food being important for your health. And so all these trends just hit, and now it's so different. Like when I talk to people, just like I said, 2 to 3 years difference, food as medicine is just this term that's thrown around now. And I'm so happy that Spoonful is a part of that and has been a part of helping to bring that awareness to our own, small extent to the world.
Yeah, so cool. So if you look back over 2020, it has been a strange year, as you highlighted, but you and Sam made a ton of progress. You added a bunch of users, you added a bunch of additional diets or filters into the product. As you think back over the last year, what's your highlight for Spoonful?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2020, we got so much done from a feature and, road mapping perspective that I think it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to find your team. It's a challenge to get into execution mode. It's a challenge to get over sort of the initial humps. But I think if I were to really be truly honest with you, I don't think it's one single thing. I think just knowing, we mentioned Sam, there's also Joe, who's our founding engineer, and the three of us just got into this great rhythm. It's not super straightforward to put your lives away and commit to something. And, there's emotional journeys, there's a lot that happens. And I think in that process for us in 2020, we found our rhythm. We really gelled as a team, and we took something that was truly just, it was a little bit more than an idea. We had of course, we had, even when we chatted, we had something out there in the world, but, we saw our baby grow up a little bit. We saw it get some legs. And I think that idea of like, we took something that was just slightly more than a prototype and turned it into a product that users rely on. I think for me, that was the most gratifying, especially knowing the way we got it was through our team, like becoming a team.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, one of the things that I always enjoy when I see or when you share some of the user feedback that you're getting, you are having a huge impact in people's lives and giving them that confidence that often people need when they decide to make a significant life change regarding their diet.
Yeah.
Share with the audience, some of the types of feedback that you receive, because that's got to be super fulfilling as you talked about the purpose and the impact that you really want to have.
No doubt. That is like the thing that, brings you up from those dark moments, those challenges, because, that on the other side of this device, the other side of what you're building, like on the other side of your databases, right? Like you actually have a real human being who is using and leaning on you and depending on you. And that can create, a lot of stress sometimes, but the flip side of that is you get such fulfillment. We get such fulfillment knowing that we've positively impacted and changed someone's life. So, for example, some of the stuff we get is, you guys gave me my freedom back. You guys gave me my confidence back. You've changed my life. Like I was struggling until I found you. And, I can't even, it tears us up. Like we celebrate each one of those wins. I mean, we share the negative and the positive the feedback,
Sure,
but when the positive comes in daily, honestly. And the moments of just the gratitude and there's some real gems in there, and they really are the fuel, I think, that helps us power through.
That's that word, I think, is the operative word, fuel.
fuel. Yeah.
that we all need that, right? We need that to just sustain us, especially, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, you know, it's a long-term journey. It's not straightforward. I often talk to entrepreneurs and say, you've got to enjoy the journey because the destination's not super clear.
Right.
And so that's what I always appreciate is I think you really are present and in the process and enjoy the work that's part of doing this.
Yeah. The day-to-day functionality that, you know, the things we build, the problems we solve, it's all really interesting stuff. And I think that alone would be satisfying. You know, it's like having a really great job. You know, you like what you're doing. It's really cool work. And then, you know, the user feedback, the thank yous, and the, you know, the knowledge that you're not just acting in vain. Like that is like as I said, that is the fuel that gets you past the tougher moments, the lows of entrepreneurship. And that's not to say that, you know, every entrepreneur is a B2C founder, you know, like it's not to say that everyone has that same particular fuel, but 100% agree that you have to find that thing that excites you and drives you, whether it is just the fulfillment of doing really cool work, which it probably, you know, could be, or is it the impact you feel like you're putting out in the world, or, you know, just you got to find that hook. And I think for us, it's some combination of both of those.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned earlier you were at this place where you felt like, you know, I think I'm ready to go start a company. This is your first time as an entrepreneur, as a CEO.
Correct.
What have you learned about yourself through this journey?
So that's a great question. It's a tough one. You know, I'm always trying to reflect on how are things changing? What am I feeling? Who am I becoming? You know, am I staying true to what I believe and have believed? And I think there is a part of me that that is probably more. I've always known I was stubborn. I mean, that's true. Like I do have a side to me that can dig in my heels here and there, and I try to work through that. But I think that stubbornness sometimes helps in this world because you get just so many people telling you no. I mean, I'm used to, you know, I would be at Salesforce and, you know, I could get any meeting I wanted. I mean, I don't mean to sound that we care, but, you know, I could call on, you know what I mean? You could get the interest you want. You can kind of control the flow. And in entrepreneurship, like you give up that control, right? You all you can do is just do your best and show up every day. And that stubbornness in me, I think, has been actually that like sometimes it's super tiny voice, it shows up in different ways, but it helps to sort of show you the path that you want to stay on, despite all the evidence to the contrary. You know, despite in that moment what feels like I should say all the evidence to the contrary, despite what like whoever you're in front of feels about you or your idea or your company, there's something in you that wants to keep going. So I think I have found that for good or for bad, that I need to see this through, or I need to see something through when I start it, you know, and that I think that has pros and cons, but I think it's definitely been revealed to me through this process.
So I just always appreciate how,
I mean, I would say, so I was just gonna say, I mean, I think if I were just to summarize that, I know it's kind of it's hard to put how you feel about yourself out in words, but like Spoonful in so many ways was like the most impractical thing I could have done at that stage of my career. You know, it was just entirely impractical. There's so many other paths that made a lot more sense, but yet it is the most fulfilling option I could have chosen. So balancing that and understanding who you are and why you do it, and like how are you going to keep going, I think that's such an important, and it was just really revealed to me through this process.
So that's so good, Deepa, because I mean, obviously with me and, you know, we've gotten to know each other a fair bit. Of course, I couldn't be more supportive of you taking the impractical approach because I tend to be that similar impractical person, right?
Right.
And but it is understanding your why, as you talked about, and just being reflective about it is so key. and they help keep you going. So it's awesome. So as you think about our work together, we got introduced and we got involved with you as our studio, and we want to be an investor in Spoonful and support what you and your team are doing, but we're also going to try to be more involved as the studio. How have you felt like that's helped at all through this process so far?
Well, I think from our initial conversation, that was way more and probably way different than you and I thought it would be when we walked into it. Sure. There was clearly just a vibe. Like we all kind of saw the world similarly and we got along. And from that initial conversation, I think the support and understanding and just empathy and confidence that Operate has offered, this is just speaking about me personally, not Spoonful yet, that was like I said, when you're out there feeling like, are you making the right decisions? And I was going through some just personal conflict and thoughts in that moment when we met, and just hearing you guys be like, stay, like, just keep it, you got this. And that from the get-go was like tremendously uplifting. And, I know that likewise, anytime if I needed to, I could call you up, right? And I could be like, can you just chat me through this? Like, can you just help me stay positive on this? And I think that support system for me personally as a CEO, that has been huge. And then from an operational perspective, I know there's been so many times where if Sam and I just have a question, or we just have a thought, or even something we don't have time or space to explore, we can just, you you guys, and someone on the team, will really be there to lend a hand in whatever capacity you guys can do. And there's always some way you can help. Like you guys are so creative and thinking of ways you can help us. So just it's like an extension of who we are, and knowing that there are people who have our back emotionally and it's functionally. But I think that that type of support system is more than business. It feels almost more like a family. And I think that, right, like that knowledge that these are really your people who want to see you succeed, not just because they're investors, but because they genuinely care. And I think that comes through in all of our conversations, Carrie.
I appreciate that. And I think, part of what we obviously are trying to do is find, I use the term lovability, but we're trying to find the lovable founders that can be, they're open to extending the family, probably, to use your, and I think we saw that so clearly with you and Sam and team when we first met. So it's, I think, exceeded all of our expectations as well, and just what can be great together, right? And it's that whole notion of we're better together. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
As you think about you were at this place where you're ready to go start something. You obviously started it. You're on your way. You're doing great. As you think about your operating principles that just drive you and help you in how you show up, how you make decisions, what do you have those summarized at all?
I have them sort of ingrained. I think there's a couple of things that I know to be true. One thing I really believe is that you have to stretch. You have to stretch yourself and you have to stretch others. So by that, I mean, you shouldn't be limited by what you or your team knows today. So for example, Sam came into Spoonful having run marketing teams, but then, at Spoonful, he's done so much more. He started doing some front end dev. He got really into the design process and user experience. And for him, that's fantastic. That's something that maybe he didn't know how to do when he walked in, but now, he's the best. And for me, it's not like I knew how to be a CEO. I knew how to lead teams, but this is an entirely different skill set. And so, we both, and even Joe, Joe came in having done a specific type of dev. And now, he picked, mobile, and he's a full stack, he's our guy on anything and everything engineering. So I think this idea of like, you don't have to find the expert, just stretch yourself and stretch your team. And, people will let you know when they don't want to stretch anymore. Right. So that idea of like, but let people grow into who they want to be. And I think, and do that for yourself. I think that's been really important for us as an organization. I think relatedly, you have to trust your team. So I think that's not always easy. And of course, like there's moments where you're going to disagree. And, but the reality is, you and I think we've talked about this before, like it is a team sport, and we grew up, you and I have grown up playing sports. And I do believe that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, what we can do individually is just, outsized by what we can do together. So you gotta have that team mentality, even in moments, when you want to do it, right? That's challenging, right? Like you gotta distribute. And I think sort of the last thing is a sense of respect. I have been in plenty of organizations where you meet that person who is just a prick. And culturally, the best organizations I've been in actually stop that, just don't encourage or allow that behavior. And obviously the workplace has changed, right, in the last 5 to 10 years, but, just be respectful to other people, to each other, but then also yourself, like know your limits. For me, respect means respecting myself means I do strive to have balance and see joy and have fun. Like I think this thing is supposed to be enjoyable. So try not to let it just feel like work. And when it feels that way, take a moment away. So yeah, I think those are probably the 2 or 3 things that guide me daily and how I think about Spoonful.
Thank you for sharing this. So meaningful, I think, for people to hear that. And so that's so good. As you think about, and I know we've talked about this a fair bit, this notion of and I think you and Sam exude this, building a product that users love, building that community around it that I think you've been committed to and continued to cultivate. And then at the same time, building a business, you've got venture capital investors that have this high growth expectation. How do you think about finding that right mixture there?
It's a lot to balance. There's a lot of people and opinions and perspectives in play, but the guiding principle, the guiding light has to be, are we actually solving a user problem? And that is number one for us is, are we solving a real problem that the user has? And then I think the related question that we've been exploring is, well, can we actually, turn the problem inside out and turn it from a problem into something that is almost enjoyable? And in our case, that meant, we could functionally tell and help people figure out what to eat. But how do we make that more? We talk about community for us, as a support system in Spoonful. But the reason we want to provide that support, just to answer your question about like community versus user versus investors, is because we think it will, like, why is community important? Yes, it gives you support, but why is that support important? It's because we want to help you feel this opposite emotion of what you may have felt before Spoonful. Before Spoonful, you may have felt scarcity and isolation and just sort of like an inward sort of closing in, right? And we want to give you a sense of abundance and options and choice, and community is part of that, right? So they all kind of work together, but ultimately we're really just trying to take this tricky thing for people with chronic conditions. It is super hard to stick with their diets. How can we make it something that is like somewhat enjoyable, hopefully more than just somewhat enjoyable, but with the end goal always being, can we help you stick with your diet so that you can feel and get better? And our hope is that the right investors will see what we're doing and will appreciate the problem we're solving and understand how many people have started to rely on Spoonful and will rely on Spoonful in the future. And, if we just focus in on the user, at the end of the day, that is what the product is. It's to help the user, and hopefully everything else follows from that.
Yeah, I think that perspective is so key. And I think that we've seen with a lot of really successful companies that even narrow user obsession in solving a real problem, delighting them, supporting them, will increase the size of the overall opportunity beyond what most of us looking at it initially can ever even imagine,
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, it seems kind of obvious, right? Like you have to focus on the user, but it's really tempting to deviate from that. And so we have to check ourselves sometimes too. Okay, why are we doing this? What will this benefit? And getting to the heart of what does a user need is a whole nother podcast, right? Like that's not as obvious as it would seem either.
Mm-hmm.
But when given, investor, capital, I guess, forget investor, the capital versus what's right for the user, we skew towards the user. And I hope we can keep doing that. That's really with the right folks on board, with the right investors, I think we can. And in the ideal scenario, they're not that far apart. Hopefully,
That's right.
Hopefully what's good for one is good for all.
That's right. So along those lines, you've been starting to have conversations with the next round of potential investors. How's that experience been for you now? It's been well over a year that you and team have been heads down, just building and expanding. How have those early conversations been?
I mean, we started last week, as you know, and they've been great. I think I now really understand the idea of how it's really hard to raise funding without traction, because I compare where we are today, which is with great traction, with where we were when we took in those first couple of checks, and it's such a different experience. The first couple of checks, especially the first one, we were raising off a deck, the proverbial deck, literally, and a concept, a theory, and the product we were pitching. I mean, I at some point want to show it to you. I mean, it's ridiculous how different it was from what we've built today. Same theme for sure. We always wanted to be in this idea of food reactivity and figuring out how to feel better through food as medicine. But just what the product manifested as was very different. And so I think that's a select world where some people will come in at that stage. But the reality is this time around, because we have the product, we have users, we have traction, we just have so much more in our court. I have found the process to just be so much easier. And we're, as I said, we're still early into it, but just really positive signals so far.
That's awesome. So we're into 2021 now. What do you feel like the big items on the agenda for Spoonful are this year?
So we have a couple different themes we're playing towards. We want to keep building on community. You saw, that we recently launched our reviews functionality so folks can review products. We want to keep building on that idea of users helping users. We also, because Spoonful is all about product discovery, we'd love to get to the point where we can use our data and leverage AI to push out recommendations to users, so we can proactively make suggestions on what they could eat that meets their diet, and that eventually will also build upon the concept of reviews, so highly reviewed. And the last thing is we've gotten a lot of feedback on combining diets and getting to more personalization, in the sense that someone wants to be both low FODMAP and gluten-free on Spoonful, or they want to be vegan, gluten-free, or they want to just add more layers to who they are, which makes a ton of sense. So we're going to work towards that as well. So quite an aggressive set of things we want to accomplish, but we'll get there. And yeah, I think it's just continuing to, and then I guess the last one, which is more than 3, this is 4 now, but getting into additional diets, right? That's sort of part of the ability to combine diets, is adding some more. So getting ourselves, we're currently in low FODMAP, gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian. And so we want to layer in a couple more of diets so that we can just make the app, useful for even more people.
So as you look ahead in this movement, which I think the food as medicine movement is only going to continue to pick up momentum, how do you think about Spoonful's place in that world?
I would love, so there's sort of what I would love versus what's practical. So I would love for Spoonful to be leading the charge on helping folks understand what food as medicine means, and having us sort of spread the gospel about why food as medicine is so awesome. Fundamentally, though, we're a startup with limited resources, and we just can't spend our capital that way. but we want to be there definitely supporting the folks who are doing it and helping in our own way to get the word out. We just unfortunately can't be the driver of that right now. So where I see us is, as I said, championing that whenever we can, but then also when food is medicine comes up, when a doctor recommends that you need to change the way you eat, that's where we want to be. We want to be right there, ideally, in the doctor's office, being recommended alongside, because right now, before Spoonful, people are being told you should eat a certain way and then being left completely on their own, just left to go online and try to figure out what that doctor actually meant. And what is that one sheeter that you were handed? How does that translate into real life, into action? And instead of just folks getting that one sheeter, we would love for doctors to start saying, oh, you know what? I'm recommending you go on this diet, and here's how I can help you stick with it. Here's how I can make your life easier. Use this app, and you'll see you can do this. And so being in that supporting role, helping people stick with their diets, right there at the moment of recommendation from a physician, that's where we would love to be.
So cool. Well, I think the other exciting part is just it's amazing as we think about it, how many different food decisions we face on a day-to-day basis, and to have that support system, as you described it, there to just create that sense of confidence and safety and community around it. You're not alone. You can, if you feel like you're going to relapse, if you feel like you're confused, there's just so many elements to it that I feel like have not been addressed.
100%. Yeah, no, there's so many moments where you want to figure out what to eat. And, it's not just, we're currently focused on the grocery store, but it's not just the grocery store, right? It's when you're at home cooking. It's when you are at a friend's house for a dinner party. It's when you go out to a restaurant. It's when we're back in the offices again and it's grabbing an office snack. There's just so many moments where, for somebody who needs to be careful about their diet, where they could do something unintentionally that could harm themselves. And so just making it easy, seamless as best we can, using data and community to really augment the power, to augment the knowledge and expertise of dietitians. Because the one thing we haven't talked about is, Spoonful was built with dietitians. We don't do this on our own. So, it's just the fact that not everybody can afford a dietitian. We think they're fantastic. It's just they're not as accessible financially to everybody. And so, if we can take that expertise and we could spread that and grow that through tech and through community, then we could help you at every moment of those food decisions that you're going to inevitably make, and therefore make your life easier.
So good. So Deepa, we're starting to come up against time here. One of the questions I'd love to ask my guests, as I am always trying to learn how others do this, how do you keep yourself sharp and innovate yourself?
I mean, do I? No, I'm kidding. I think
Absolutely.
the real way I've always done it in the past is I do believe in trying new things and taking on new challenges, as you could tell at Spoonful, and reinventing yourself every couple of years. I think it's important to get a little uncomfortable and put yourself in a challenging situation. So that could manifest in different jobs, different functionality. I've worn legal, business development, product, and now CEO hats. And I know you've done right there with me.
A few things.
A few things on your, even just like today, what you have on your agenda, on your plate. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just changing things up for yourself on a macro level when it makes sense. I think along that same theme, I try to learn something new every day. That could be as simple as a new recipe. It could be, going out with my kids and learning how to skateboard. It's really just zooming out of your day-to-day life and seeing the world for what it is. It could be even a conversation with a friend where you learn something new, but just this idea of like what we know, what I know is so small compared to what there is to learn, and keeping that perspective, I think that keeps me as sharp as I can be. And then I think the other piece for me, and this is probably, I don't know if this works for everyone, but this is my thing. My life is really full right now. I've got 2 kids who are in distance learning. I've got my husband in our household. We've got obviously the startup, it's chaos and crazy in a great way, but it's a lot. So one of the things I've been intentional about is actually disengaging a little bit. So, it's probably the opposite of what people would say to stay sharp, but for me, it's just turning my brain off, whether that is through, it could be through exercising, it could be through meditating. Lately, I've been playing around with journaling, but just turning the brain off, because for me, I was actually just talking to my husband about this last night. I'm constantly like solving problems in my mind. It could be like, it could be as simple as like, how am I going to get the kids to show up on time for class tomorrow, to as complicated as, okay, when we go for that next round of funding, what milestones do I think we should be at? And so, that idea of just like turning off to be your best so that I can be sharp, is something that I've been really experimenting with lately. And I think it's really helping me out.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So
yeah, no doubt.
Last question. When you think of an entrepreneur, you're now fully immersed as one. As you think of an entrepreneur who's earlier in their journey, they're starting to think about building this company ultimately. What's the one area that you think they should primarily focus on?
So someone who's just starting out, just what area of the world you want to have impact on. You can't solve every problem. You can't change everything, but what do you recognize that's broken in the world or that can be improved, where you can really lend a hand? And you could stay, and I'm sure so many people before me have said this part, but it has to be something you could stay with for like a decade. Like what's the challenge that, if you were to fast forward your life, you could be like, okay, I'm still excited by this, 10 years later. And I will feel like if I helped here, like I left my dent, I left my mark in this world. So yeah, I think it's really identifying what you think is broken and what you could motivate yourself to keep solving day in, day out.
That's a great perspective. Deepa, thank you so much for sharing that and for joining me. I always get super fired up every time we chat, because your passion and your presence are always just super inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I have so much fun every time we get in these conversations. It's a joy to, like I said, to take a step away, right? And to appreciate all we are doing and trying to do and what the chances we are given here. So I appreciate the opportunity for you and I not to chat business right now, but to actually chat, sort of holistic perspective on things. Thank you for asking all these great questions.
Absolutely. And I am so happy and excited by our partnership, and just so proud to be able to be a small part of everything that you're doing, and grateful that we've developed this partnership and this friendship. And thank you for being part of the Operate podcast as well.
Super fun. Thank you for having me, Carrie.
Yes, we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Operate Podcast. If you like this conversation, as a favor to me, you can rate us, review us, or subscribe, or tell your friends. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at Operate Podcast. Until next week, get out there and operate.